Good morning, everyone. For those of you who were here earlier, welcome back. For those of you joining us for the first time in the education sessions, welcome. My name is Thomas Hare. I'm the Chief Content Officer of the PDMI. We welcome you, PDMieast, and to all of our education sessions. We say thank you to the education sponsor, Blue Water, who has helped us put on this event this week. Blue Water's sent us some video and a series of videos to share with you, and I'm going to share this one right now.
Familia Ramírez. Deje el drama para las telenovelas.
Pero ahora no tengo que jugar con dolores. Me pongo Gembana y el dolor se va.
So thank you again to Blue Water for your support of PDMieast. We are here today at 11 o'clock. Our U.S. Hispanic Council, which is chaired by Marcelino Miyares of D2H Partners, has put together a great conversation about how CTV outlets are reaching Hispanic consumers. He's got a tremendous panel. I'm sure we'll all introduce themselves, and I'll let you take it from here, Marce.
Yep, so if you can start at the last chair.
Sure.
Name, company, and what do you do?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mazzarri. I come with NBCU Universal Telemundo. I am a digital sales director. I've been with the company for over 12 years, and I oversee basically all the digital and streaming business that comes through the South Florida office, both for Hispanic and general market.
Hey, everybody. Matt Brehm, joining you from Roku. I'm part of the Roku performance sales team, joined by my colleagues Sydney and Tara Lynn here in the front. So we currently are working with performance TV agencies, both in the Spanish and English side, and we're happy to chat with you guys afterwards and excited to be here.
I'm Beth Johnson. I am at Omni Direct. I'm a senior director of media there, and we are 100% full service Spanish language advertising agency. I've been there about 4 years.
Joe Melaragno with Samsung Ads. I've been with Samsung about 7 years. I lead our performance sales team as well as our external demand team, which is all of our partnerships with SSPs, DSPs, other sellers outside of the Samsung org.
Great. And I'm Marcelino Miyares. I'm a co-managing partner of D2H Partners, which is the DRTV-focused agency targeting the U.S. Hispanic market. So with that, we begin. Okay, so the way this is going to work is we have some questions that we're going to post, and then we've sort of prearranged who's going to answer what, and there may be some chiming in, and feel free to save your questions for the end of the panel. We'll try to get everything in. So just to set up for some context, according to Synopsys, CTV accounted for 53% of all impressions, up 12% from last year. And last year, we began, in the last panel, we began to explore sort of the hows to get involved with multicultural CTV. Today, we want to figure out where is the audience. It feels like it's everything everywhere all at once, because Latinos, through streaming, are watching much more than Spanish language TV. So that's sort of the general context. Where are the fish? Where do we fish where the fish are? So one of the interesting developments, and this will be the first question, one of the interesting developments of the CTV space is that, what I just said, Hispanics are watching more non-Spanish language content than we might have imagined. So where and how do we find them? And as performance marketers, I think somebody here would say they're actually two separate questions, but as performance marketers looking for campaign attribution, how can we mitigate the risk? I think Beth and I have both tested CTV on several occasions, and we haven't found it to work. But we're seeing, and you probably are too, that are on the general market side of our clients, they're finally seeing some success in the performance space on CTV. So now we need to translate that success in Spanish. So how do we get started?
So I'll take the first part of the question, where do we find them? And as you're talking Hispanic in the panel, I can definitely tell you that Hispanics are everywhere. 1 out of every 5 Americans is Hispanic, and we are consuming content across a multitude of platforms. Actually, studies show that over 80% of Hispanics are actually consuming English language content. So partnering with both publishers and platforms that have a wide range of options to reach this audience is very important. And also thinking about, are we reaching them at scale and also on ad-supported inventory? Because we see, especially on the streaming world with so many players, we see, let's say, legacy streamers with millions and millions of subscribers, but when it comes to advertising, the ground where we all play in from an agency and a client side, are these ad-supported Hispanic subscribers. So that is important to look at when you are planning a campaign to reach Hispanics. Just to put it into perspective, when you look at NBC Universal, we reach 8 of every 10 Hispanics. 4 of those Hispanics are with our Telemundo Spanish language offering, so that tells you half of those are, half of the reach is on English language content. So always having a strategy from a publisher POV that caters to that Hispanic, that is always evolving from a generational, from a cultural, and also from a language perspective is important. And so when you look into where you're gonna place your brand and your message, always align with that type of environment.
I think you mentioned, how do you scale, right? And right now, I think in the current CTV environment, the scale for Spanish language inventory is not where we want it to be. So I think with platforms like a Samsung, like a Roku, we have the ability to understand what language is their Roku set to. Is it set to Spanish? But they might be watching English language content. We have the ability to use English or Spanish language creatives, target those households that are watching English content, but might have their device set to Spanish. So that's a way to really open up more than double the avails potentially, but still be confident that you're reaching those Spanish language people.
Okay, so we have 3 of the 5 largest Spanish language content aggregators on this stage. Can you estimate the share of spend going to Hispanic versus general market? All 3 of you have a footprint in both, right? Do you have a sense of how many Hispanic ad dollars are being spent versus general market dollars through CTV?
I think on our end, we're seeing 20 to 25% of the budgets are allocated to Hispanic. I think we lead with our Telemundo and with our Spanish language offering. So I think we are lucky and we are privileged that we have such a strong product that garners us that share. But I think it's a process of education also in the industry. And like Matt is saying, just because when we are able to leverage English language content outside of the Telemundo platform, we've been able to grow that share up to 50% or even more just because of that, because of the technology allows us to then target Spanish speakers watching the NBC Universal portfolio, Peacock, and so on. So it all depends on the strategy, but that's what we're seeing.
We can't share specific numbers, so to speak, but the consumption is way up, both from a reach standpoint as well as an actual hours of Spanish language content consumption standpoint. So we are leaning more into that space, but it hasn't turned quite as quickly as general market. Not quite in terms of but it's getting there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that the ad dollars do not yet line up with the content consumption numbers, but I think it's on us to all kind of tell that story and make sure that we can deliver, especially against performance objectives.
I'm sure Beth would agree, those of us who have worked in the Hispanic market for a while, everything lags a little behind.
Yeah, it's a little bit behind, but I think it's catching up. I think it really depends on the demographic you're trying to target, as with anything, any kind of media strategy or plan, and also what your creative is, what your CTA is. I think, streaming, to the previous panel that discussed it, is very different kind of approach, and I think you have to take that into account. And I think that's where the scalability lies, is trying to find those English-speaking Hispanics that are consuming both areas of content and trying to reach that middle portion. I don't think you're trying to gain English language or general market customers or sales for your clients. I think you're really just trying to find that in-between bubble that is consuming both content. And I think, at least in my experience, some of the testing that we've done has been really very more narrowly targeted, and I think you might have to start with a larger target to get that scale.
And to build on that, like I think advertisers need to go all in a little bit, right? They can't just test for 2 weeks and jump out because they don't see immediate results. You got to have some kind of test and learn plan. Always be testing 1 or 2 or 3 different audiences, have something to learn from, build off that, and continue down that path. I think one thing that we're doing at Roku is trying to encourage a conversation with the end streamer. And you can't just take a creative from linear, slap it on CTV, have a phone number, have a 60-second ad, and expect it to work, right? It's a different audience, but there is a lot of overlap too. So we've introduced like interactive ads, what we call action ads, where you can actually, with the Roku remote, rather than just a QR code, use the Roku remote to interact with the user, send them a text message, send them an email with a phone number, offer, discount, what have you. And we're actually able to sometimes provide those leads back to the advertiser to work into their CRM. So whatever you can do to continue the conversation during and after the ad experience will help mitigate the risk of performance.
Yeah, we've talked before, you've talked about the long tail. You mentioned you can't run ads for a couple of weeks, expect an immediate response. You sort of need to let the journey carry itself out, and through tracking and other things, you can sort of paint that picture. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because you're the first person I hear that from a year ago.
Me? Well, I think this will be a very long panel if we go down that path, but there are a lot of different ways to measure, right? And I think that there is no one right way. And at Roku, we have a measurement partner program, so we invite partners to come with their methodologies, and we vet, and if it aligns, you're part of that matrix for us. And we're not here to tell anyone the right way to do it, but we're trying to meet advertisers where they're at, and someone selling a car is going to have a very different way to measure success than someone selling a toothbrush, right? So you just have to figure out what works best for your company and try to make it as holistic as possible across all the partners you work with.
So this is kind of a stat question. According to various sources, last year, U.S. Hispanics watched 30 billion minutes of CTV content. And you may not have an answer as to where that is or what the projection is in 2024. But Joe, you mentioned the hours are not keeping up with the content. Do you have a sense of?
Yeah. So what we saw in the most recent quarter, Q1 2024, was that of Hispanic households in the Samsung Smart TV footprint, 86% were engaging with streaming, which is 5% higher than the universe kind of as a whole, right? So we have a more engaged streaming audience. And on average, they were spending over 2.5 hours a day, so 156 minutes per day with streaming, which is significantly more than they spend with linear. Linear is about 74 minutes. And then the year over year is where it gets really interesting. So this is on average. So average streaming went up 2% for each user, while linear went down 13%. So I think that kind of shows the importance of all of us figuring out, how do we reach these consumers in the streaming environment, and how do we get those performance outcomes? Because if linear continues to shrink at 13% a year, right, you're not going to have very many viewers to reach in a couple of years.
Okay, so there's a lot of ads that are falling into Hispanic TV households. Beth, you mentioned there are a lot of Latinos watch a lot of English language TV. We've talked about other languages. Are you seeing a greater intentionality in CTV buys for Hispanic? Those of you that are on the sales side. In other words, are more advertisers coming to intentionally buy CTV to reach Hispanics as opposed to accidentally or programmatically landing in Hispanic content?
For us, it's definitely intentional. That we actually have a very consultative approach when we work with multicultural agencies, and like I said, we are thankfully leaders in the industry from a publisher standpoint, so they come to us already very intentionally wanting to place campaigns because they know the quality of the audience of the product, so everything is very intentional. We approach them in the sense like which audience do you want to reach? To Beth's point, the mix-up of the Hispanic audience evolves yearly, and it changes with the generation, with where they are, with who are they trying to reach, with the category that you are trying to play. So we are able to tell you, okay, so this audience you're going to be able to reach it with a mix of Telemundo and Peacock, or Telemundo or the full NBC Universal portfolio. So it's always very intentional. We obviously also offer programmatic options. So for those advertisers that prefer to transact programmatically, our Spanish language inventory is available there. But even that is intentional. We segment it in a way that, we offer the inventory in a way that they know that they will be airing in that content and not accidentally airing on English language content when their goal is to reach in language. And then at the same time, I think creative plays a big role, because if you have a Spanish language creative, you want to make sure, it also depends on strategy, but you want to make sure that you are running on in language Spanish language content. However, I have found myself targeted as a Hispanic on English language content with a creative in Spanish, and I'm like, oh, I like it, because it's like, they're talking to me. So I don't like, I feel in conversations there are mixed reviews about that aspect, where no, if it's English language content, it has to be English language creative. But if you have the technology that that you're reaching a Spanish speaker or somebody that watches Spanish language content, it's actually like a welcome surprise to be targeted or to be approached by a brand that sees you in an environment that is not necessarily designated for you. So I think it's a mix. It's a matter of, again, learning about the environment, learning about the strategy, knowing what the client wants to accomplish, and knowing who you're talking to. So I think that's our approach, at least.
So, question for Matt and Joe in particular: what are you, as performance marketers or performance media sales organizations, what are you betting on that's going to bring more clients to advertise in Hispanic content? You're making a bet, right?
Right. No, I think in 2022 is when we saw this stark increase in Hispanic consumption, Spanish language consumption, and so we built out our own Spanish language bilingual hub in our owned and operated app called the Roku channel, and that's Espacio Latino. So the Roku channel itself has 80,000 movies and TV shows, 450 live channels to indulge in. But then we created a subset of Spanish language and bilingual content because we saw Spanish language folks coming into the Roku channel and requesting that type of content. So that becomes kind of like our one-stop shop for all that type of consumption. So we do encourage advertisers to come with the intention of advertising either in language or in English, as long as we're targeting those folks correctly. And we're using what we've done to develop our Roku originals in English. We're using the same type of approach for Spanish language. So we really lean into really 4 categories: entertainment, home, food, and sports. So that's what we see people consuming on the Roku platform, so that's how we developed our original content development according to. And so we're taking that one step further now with Espacio Latino, and just last month we launched a show called Carpe Diem with Wampa, who is a major Mexican social media celebrity, 34 million Instagram followers, and he goes around the world doing these amazing challenges with his girlfriend and friends, and they're speaking English or speaking Spanish, and this is the type of content that Gen Z and millennial Hispanics are looking to, because it feels like he's connecting with them on a personal level. It feels authentic. They feel seen because they're in their homes speaking both languages. They're not just speaking Spanish. They want to feel represented, and that's how we're trying to approach our original content with. And we feel if we continue to develop content that's going to resonate with these audiences because it represents who they are, the ad dollars will eventually follow.
Another perspective?
So from the perspective of Samsung TV Plus, we always focus first on how do we drive viewer engagement, how do we give them a really good experience of free ad-supported content. And we've taken that same approach to the Spanish language market, right? A lot of that, we're not investing in developing our own original programming at this time, but a lot of it is making sure that we get the best media owners and content producers to push their content into Samsung TV Plus. So last year we launched 10 channels with Univision. It was their first too fast. and I think they've seen really good results. Part of our other strategy is local news in each market. Part of our strategy for English, and now partnering with Telemundo, we have local market news in Spanish in a variety of markets as well. So I think we're trying to make sure that we have the right content so that users are engaged and it becomes sort of habit-based viewing. And then once we have that engaged viewership, it's on us on the ad side to make sure we can tell the story to partners like yourself on how we deliver value. But because we've been able to grow the audience, which you and I were chatting about a bit yesterday, we've seen significant growth in how we can deliver against this Spanish language opportunity compared to even a year ago. So I think that really helps tell the story, because you find that if you only do this programmatically, if the audience isn't that big and maybe the targeting segments don't have as good a match rates in this community as well, you can never scale a campaign in the way that you want. And so I think making sure that we can take business, whether it's programmatic, whether it's on an insertion order, whether it's through Samsung DSP, really does help to grow the market for everyone. And then we have to make sure we perform for you.
Yeah. Beth, so what's it going to take for us to convince our clients to keep trying CTV?
They have to grab a lot of patience, which not many have. So I think you just really, it's really hard to convince clients to wait, for 6 weeks or however long it takes to get a sale on CTV. So that's the challenge. First, we had the original challenge, which was to get them to advertise to the Hispanic market, period, on linear. And now it's just really, I think the way we tell them about it and show it is through having a strong, solid attribution model or partner so that you can really show and illustrate the halo. Also, all of the trends that you've mentioned, Marcelino and everybody on this panel, the trends that viewership is going that direction. And even though, linear's not dead, everybody always likes to say it's dead, it's not dead. It is, viewing patterns are shifting. So depending on the target demographic of your product or your service, whether it's lead gen or you're just trying to sell something, you have to have a combination of the two. And we just have to figure out how to get there. So I think, all clients realize the importance and they understand the viewing shifts, and it's just really trying to illustrate through data and really smart tracking where that's going to end up, the longer tail of it, and it's not going to be immediate.
Yeah, I hope I'm not misquoting, but in the last panel, which was a CTV panel, somebody made a point of saying linear is not dead. And in fact, most of streaming today still is to linear channels. So he gave linear a lifespan of 2 to 10 years.
Yes.
That's a wide range. I don't know what that means, but linear is still vital to everything we do, regardless of how you get there. So we brought this question up in October of last year, and it's still kind of relevant. So according to Nielsen, 74% of Hispanics say they use streaming services in a typical day, and I think you said 86% of some large number. And then later in that report, Nielsen talks about YouTube, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, Disney, HBO, and Paramount as being the most popular destinations. And what I found interesting about that is that there's no mention of a VIX or a Canela. I understand why Telemundo and Univision wouldn't be in there, but what does this say? Where are Latinos watching Spanish language aggregated content?
So I think I can say that, being on the inside of this media mix, the reporting and the data reporting needs to improve, and I think the lack of reporting, accurate reporting for the smaller streamers is what's causing this misperception. I think, the space is large enough, everybody, if the content, if there's quality content, if the audience is engaged, I think any and all players have a fair chance, to earn a share of the advertising dollars. I think the reporting is what so far has been challenging. I found myself finding Telemundo metrics from just a select sources. So that makes it challenging to, like, unless you have your first internal first-party data, is sometimes for the market as a whole, it might create a misconception of, oh, these streamers are not performing well, or they have a very small share. I think at this stage there's still a severe under-reporting of the performance of these streamers. So I think as the reporting and the measurement gets better as a whole, we'll start seeing these players hopefully rise. Especially when we talk about the Hispanic audience. I know when Peacock launched, and within Peacock we have our Telemundo Plus content. Now that Peacock is part of that, let's say big player mix, we are now able to see some data, meaningful data, to illustrate the Hispanic, story. But before that, it was a challenge, and I think for some streamers it could still be a challenge. So I think it's a matter of the industry, ramping up measurement and ramping up reporting to give everybody a fair chance.
And the data is a little misleading because both Roku and Samsung, you guys have bet big on Telemundo and Univision Local News, which is a big driver. But it's accessed through your platforms, not necessarily direct.
Which is a part of the challenge, because we've seen, like Joe was saying, Telemundo launched news fast channels last year across multiple regions, and we've seen tremendous growth on both the Roku and the Samsung platform. So we see definitely the value, and when we get the reporting, again, is on the platform, but it's through our content. See what I'm saying? So I think until the measurement becomes better, then we'll definitely see,
Yeah, I mean, to your point, a vast majority of Roku channel viewers do not stream or do not watch linear, right? And so they're going to watch the NBC News Now or the Telemundo in our fast section of Roku channel, but they're not going to watch NBC News or Telemundo on linear. And so it very much is deduplicated. And so we benefit when you benefit, and vice versa, right? I think to kind of go back to your question about like how can VIX and Canelo, stand this, I think that the Rokus, the Paramounts, the Peacocks, they have a lot of cross-platform marketing available to them, right? Like they can go linear to streaming, streaming to linear, and promote those placements where VIX and Canelo don't have that handy. Roku, and I think Samsung does this as well, we do offer like home screen placements for these apps to promote themselves, right? And so I think VIX and Canela and the other apps that might be struggling a little bit to get the viewership they're hoping for can tap into those home screen ads and drive new viewers that way. It's a pay-to-play world, but that's the way to kind of remain relevant. And now we're opening up those placements to brands as well, because people love to, they can turn on their TVs and see the first ad impression with a brand or a VIX or a Peacock or a Telemundo, and it's a really, really effective way to kind of get your name out there.
If I'm not mistaken, you can watch Canelo programming and VIX, not everything, but on Espacio Latino, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, we have a lot of live channels that in our live guide that come from these providers. Like Samsung does as well, and that's a huge amount of consumption by these audiences.
Anything to add?
And one thing about this list, you also don't see on there, and it's possible this was the moderator's choice, but any of the fast services, right? Like Tubi, Pluto, Samsung TV Plus, Roku channel. And if you look at Nielsen's monthly gauge, you often see many of the fast services on that list. So it is possible that there's also kind of a measurement issue of how do you probably allocate who are the Hispanic folks, whether it's in the panel or in a survey.
They run out of cells on their Excel to count how many publishers they are. So I think until they all come to a consensus of what they're tracking and how they're actually, sharing this information, we're all going to have this issue of who's going to be, at the top or not.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue for the next question. And I'm never sure if this question is framed the right way, right? So how are Hispanics, what are going to be the major platforms for Hispanic to access, as you brought up now, the couple thousand fast channels that there are, and in Spanish they're in the hundreds. Is it through apps? Is it through the channels directly? Or is it through these larger, for lack of a better term, constellations, like a Peacock, for example? Or through a Roku or through a Samsung that are sort of the biggest aggregators of everything?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge is not just how do you distribute the content, but then for some of the largest creators of Spanish language content, how do you properly monetize it, right? So FAST is a great way to distribute content, get in front of a lot of viewers and consumers. Yes, it's ad supported, but we know that many media companies also are trying to find that subscription angle because it's a diversified revenue stream. And I think that's where there are some challenges, right? Especially if it is an app that is Spanish language only, and a lot of Hispanics are bilingual, and so they're able to get Spanish language content in apps that also offer a lot of English language content. You have to make the value proposition you have to provide can be quite challenging. And then I think some of the other interesting things, from what we see, the Hispanic audience is 50% more likely to use a virtual MVPD than kind of the US generally. Right now, as far as I understand it, Univision is not available in Hulu with Live TV, which is one of the top 2 virtual MVPDs, right? So that is a service where the Hispanic community is getting a lot of great content, probably getting Telemundo, but they can't access Univision. And I'm sure that's part of a strategy, but you have to be in these services that offer content in both languages because that is so important to so many of the Hispanic viewers out there.
I definitely agree. I think the key is to be pretty much everywhere your audience is and have a distribution strategy that is solid, to Joe's point. For example, and I go back to what I know, so Telemundo, we have our own standalone app that users, subscribers can access for live and on-demand content. Then Telemundo Spanish language content is also available on Peacock for those cord cutters that don't have DVDs, but they go directly through the subscription service. And then we also partner with Samsung and Roku to do fast channels. So we have from a network perspective, we have our Telemundo Entertainment, Telemundo News. We have coming up also a sports opportunity. And then on the local station group side, we were the first local station group to do Spanish language fast channels regionally, and we've seen crazy amount of growth there. And this is linear content by nature, so that the perception of linear content is dead. Not really. People are still tuning into the fast channel, which is a linear experience to that point, and they're consuming local news, they're consuming specials, they're consuming entertainment content. So it's a matter of finding the audience and the right platform and the right state of mind. Because one day I might want to watch the news, but then at night I might just turn on Peacock to watch a movie in Spanish. So it's a matter of where is that consumer in every piece of their journey, and how we can target them in different ways with different messages, and also leveraging the platform's capabilities, the innovations, the data targeting technology. What can we do to really holistically across all of the different outlets, target them in a way that they feel, okay, it's a consistent, cohesive strategy from a brand that is trying to reach me across different points, that is not siloed to just one service or one streamer. It's it's across everything, and I think share is very important, and having a mixed strategy is very important. Just like with going back to linear, when you go up place a linear buy, you look at market shares, rankers, ratings, and you place your buys based on where the audience is. I think streaming, because of the reporting, challenges that we've had, I think is still very early to say, okay, all your money should go here, even though there are some key players. I think the right strategy, especially for the Hispanic audience that is so diverse and so everywhere, is to really say, okay, so what outlet is going to give me, let's say, the most reach and the most scale for the campaign that I'm trying to activate. So it's a matter of partnering with a platform and a publisher that really understand the Hispanic audience, because it's at the core of what they do.
And to build off that, I think fast apps, fast channels can be a very consistent, always-on presence for a lot of streamers. So for the Roku channel, with looking at our Hispanic audience, 71% of them do not watch another fast AVOD app. They're very loyal, probably similar to the Samsung, I would assume. And part of that is the experience. You have a Roku TV, there's Roku channels right there. You have a Samsung TV, you turn it on. It's so easy to access Samsung TV Plus that way. So it becomes an always-on presence for these, and it's easy to bring a lot of streamers in that way because there's a lot of familiar, family-friendly, accessible content that maybe they've known about for years and they grew up with. And so it becomes this way to just have them always engage with your platform. And it also is a good for advertisers out there wondering, hey, should I advertise on AVOD or FAST, or should I do it on Netflix or Peacock or whatever? One thing we find is that a lot of these consumers and streamers do not watch the Netflix every day of the month, right? They don't. They're there to watch The Crown for 10 hours of binging and then they're out, right? And people sign up for subscription services and watch one show and then cancel. So that's a real problem right now, and I think FAST and AVOD is a great place to kind of consider because there's that, you're not worried about the subscription churn.
Yeah, we talked a lot about this last year. More than almost 70% of Hispanics are willing to consume ads in order to not subscribe. And I think that's a real important point to this question. They're going to be entering more through AVOD, regardless of where it is. Then the last question, and this is more, I was there already. This is more from a buying perspective, right? So in the last panel, they talked about a Venn diagram with linear-only TV watchers, streaming-only TV watchers, and then obviously in the middle, there's those watchers who watch everything. So from a buying perspective, I guess I'll start with Beth on this one. Are we moving to a buying model that's 100% digital, 100% programmatic, because people are going to be watching linear channels through streaming? Are we moving in that direction? Is it a 2 to 10 year thing?
Likely, maybe 5 to 10. I'll give it 5 to 10. But likely we are, because the ads are going to be served up dynamically. They're going to be served up like they are in digital at some point on TV. So I think from a performance marketing standpoint, it's very hard to make programmatic work, but we will get to the stage, I'm sure, where those viewers overlap, and we'll be able to scale it in a way that makes sense programmatically. We've tried some addressable things in the past and programmatic, and it just hasn't had the scale, or you target so narrowly that you're missing, a lot of the audience. But I think, certainly within the next 10 years, TV is going to be delivered that way, and we'll have to adapt. We'll have to adapt our buying model to that kind of strategy, and go where the shoppers are and where the viewers are, and that might be even on an English station, as long as the ad is in culture. Mm-hmm. It depends really, like I said, on before, and I'll say it ad nauseum, I guess, on your target demographic. If you're older skewing, you're still going to want to be in language. How that looks in the next 10 years, though, could be very different. So I do think it's moving in that direction. Are we there now? No. I don't agree that we're there now.
Yeah, we're still
buying
90%. 90%
we're still buying the old school way, but it's you do have to consider where your audience is, and that's where the buying model will change and shift.
And as sales organizations, are you sort of wishing for a 100% digital programmatic buying model? Or?
We're indifferent, right? We just want to meet the agencies where they're at, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, as Beth alluded to, programmatically, you can be hyper-targeted, you can get great conversion rates. The cost might be a little higher CPM-wise because you're narrowing your audience, but there's a time and a place for your programmatic buys, and there's a time and place for your direct buys. And I think with direct, if you're thinking more broad, you might get some CPM savings that way, but also in 10 years, we might not be able to still serve certain high-impact ads programmatically. So I think that until everything from a digital buying standpoint can be transacted from a capability standpoint, there's always going to be a need from a direct buy with the publishers to do the fun, cool stuff.
I think what I would like to see, and I'm always very cautious about, saying, oh, this has definitely happened, because if anything's sure in our industry, that things change yearly. So what I would like to see on my end is kind of stop looking at it from a linear and a digital perspective, and look at it from a media perspective. I particularly, being from a publisher POV that has a linear footprint and also a digital footprint, we look at it holistically. We look at it from a way where is the audience and how can we best serve the brands to get their message out. your point, like there are still like those big ticket items, live sports, tentpoles, award shows, stuff like that are still very heavily still on linear. That those will continue, I think, to exist and draw attention and draw interest from brands and audiences. It's a matter of like changing the lingo. Like it's not about how much share of the linear we're shaving. It's like how much value we're adding to the campaigns by strategizing a portion of linear, a portion of digital, and with the evolution of linear, with next gen TV, it's a matter of years where we see addressable like data-driven opportunities also on linear. So I think it's a matter of all of us as an industry collectively being informed and open-minded, and not only, to your point, not only on the Hispanic side, on the general market as well. It's a matter of like we are in a very privileged cross point of our industry where we have to decide which side we're going to be. Are we going to be the trailblazers that are driving change and are opening minds and are looking for the opportunity, or are going to be the ones that this is how it's always been done and this is how what's worked, and kind of like perpetuating that mindset. I think we are in a very interesting, and that's what I tell my team all the time. Like, be happy that you are living in these media times, as convoluted and as confusing that they may be sometimes, that the opportunities that we are seeing, that we have these days, are something that nobody could dream of. And I'm pretty sure that next year, if we are here again, in a different panel, I'm pretty sure we have 3 new things to talk about, because measurement has changed, because reporting has changed. So I think it's a matter of, like, as an industry, being flexible, like, and educating our clients. Like to your point, Beth, it's like, like telling our clients, you need to try this, otherwise you're never gonna know, So I think that's where I see the media as a whole going. It's a matter of like exploration and open-mindedness, hopefully. That's what at least I would like to see it.
And I think what we're trying to do is really focus on to your point, it's a holistic view, right? So stop talking about a linear cost per outcome. Stop talking about a CTV cost per outcome. Talk about a blended cost per outcome, whatever your strategy or your goal is, or the client's goal is. Start framing things in that kind of terminology to get them used to the idea that these 2 things have to go together. You will not survive without the 2 things going together, and to look at it as a holistic, all-in blended cost per outcome KPI.
It's not a matter of if you're going to need to convert over to CTV. It's a matter of when, right?
When.
You don't want to wait 5 years to figure out your strategy and be caught, unprepared, and you're going to be fighting from behind. And you just have to start thinking and planning for it now. Start testing it and learning and figure out your strategy.
Any last words, Joe? That was the last question.
I mean, we've had many of these same conversations for the English language side the last few years, and there's still brands that are slow to move from linear into streaming on that side. But I think it's just about being good partners, being flexible, right? If you want to work on an IO, we're happy to work on an IO. If you want to work programmatically, we're happy to do that. Coming to shows like this, talking to new measurement partners, seeing do they have a unique solution that can help solve attribution and measurement for the Hispanic audience that maybe is different and meets that need in a way that the ones that have gained ground the last few years on the general market side don't meet that need. So I think it's up to all of us to keep trying, keep testing, and make sure that we work together to kind of help bring all these advertisers into streaming.
Okay, we close with that. We're open to questions from anyone.
Any questions from the audience?
Yes, thank you so much. The questions were and the answers were very insightful. I'm Juan Carlos Sanchez from Orca TV. We're seeing a tremendous growth from the Latino market inside the US and expansion into Latin America. For the panel, what do you think is going to be the role of the Hispanic media investment, whether it is top of the funnel or bottom of the funnel, in 2 years when the World Cup takes place in the US and Mexico? Just want to hear the panel and the perspective. Thank you.
You're carrying the World Cup.
I know.
So start with you.
And believe it or not, we've been preparing for it since the last game of the last World Cup, which I know if everybody saw it, was like a very heart-pumping match. We look at it we are recommending brands to really look at especially with an opportunity like the World Cup, which is like a main stage, a tentpole. Like the audience that event is going to draw is probably only matched by the Super Bowl, I think, from an audience perspective. It's a matter of like really think about it. Obviously, whatever your budgets and your strategy allows, but think about it from the long run. Like we are already working with advertisers that want to kind of like pave the way and start advertising now, kind of like top of the funnel, brand awareness, and kind of like getting their name out there. And then the plan is to, as the event gets closer, then go down the funnel and really, like have more of a conversion strategy. So I think the World Cup and any sporting event always drives a lot of audiences, at least what we've seen in our platforms. On the Telemundo, obviously with the World Cup and La Liga, and then obviously on Peacock with all things Sunday Night Football, we see that sports is really a key drawing for the audiences and advertisers. The long run, like I said, is like start for those advertisers that really want to make a big splash. They're starting from now. They're starting to kind of like associate themselves with our sports and our football offerings through as we lead to the World Cup, the qualifiers, any type of news, content, sponsorship opportunities, both on linear and on streaming. So I think it's basically build a strategy that will kind of like make a splash as you go through and during the games. That's what we've seen successful.
I would say that some advertisers might not have the wallets to be in games, and I think that can be a deterrent at times. At Roku, we invest in a lot of shoulder content and to present a lot of certain themed sports or whatever, and we can present sponsors, whether Hispanic or English, to kind of sponsor that content and present it, and still have that association with soccer or football, but not necessarily have to pay for the in-game spot. So a couple different ways to approach it.
Yeah, and actually, if I may add to that, with the rights of streaming consumption, so let's say 3 World Cups ago, where streaming, like I think the Russia one in 2018, streaming it was like a fraction of what it was in the last World Cup. So that's something that we, as a company, have also added to our strategy. Is like we are recommending a fluid campaign, meaning that if you're going to buy spots in games or during the tournament, you also buy a healthy share of live stream impressions, because again, the consumption is going to happen. Maybe one day you are at home watching comfortable on your TV through linear or whatever it may be, but someday you might be at work and you have an option, or the option than having your phone or your tablet. So having that fluid strategy that would allow us as a publisher to dynamically place your ad and get to your goals is important, and also for you to, like, again, for the lack of duplication between linear and streaming, to make sure that you're reaching audiences on both ends of the spectrum, let's say.
Anyone else?
Did you get your answer?
Dan Greskovic, Samsung Ads. Beth, you had mentioned that a lot of the older demos tend to consume strictly Spanish language content, but I know from some previous conversations that what's often the case is children or grandchildren end up helping them respond to those ads, whether it's visiting the website. So is there any shift in attribution being accounted for, that maybe they're responding to the ad on an English language website as opposed to what they're directed to in the actual creative? Or is that a hurdle that still needs to be overcome?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something we've taken a look at closely in the last couple of years, and I think, to your point, it hasn't been addressed yet. It's really, you need a multi-touch point attribution model to try and track that, and it's been very difficult to get that solution. But it is something that we are actively pursuing testing out, whether it's through creative strategy, but it is something that's on our roadmap. But I'm certain that it's happening. I don't have the data, the numbers to really prove it, and that's what we have to get to. We have to get to better measurement of how that's happening. Also, if you're working on a brand or a product or a service that's airing in both languages, it becomes even trickier, and you're airing on search, paid search, social, all of the different channels, then you really need to have that partner, that attribution partner that looks at the multi-channel approach and can really tell you exactly what's driving that last touch point. So I I think that's still a challenge to be overcome. Hopefully that answers your question.
I wanted to add to that question because we get, South Florida being the retirement home of America, we get a lot of 65 plus, requests. We also have to think, and that's where the generational impact and changes, have to be top of mind. So we think right now, I think we can still think or have the perception that 65 plus is this old lady knitting in a corner. In 10 years, that's not going to be the case. We are all going to be 65-year-olds very soon, So we are tech savvy. We are familiar with like different streaming services. So it's a matter of like, we have to also change the way we see the different demos and what the categories particularly. Because maybe for a health category, yes, maybe somebody that is, let's say, because really the sweet spot for the health category is not really 65 plus, it's more like the 72, 73-year-old, because those are the ones that are really making decisions about their health plans and stuff like that. And they may require their children to help make a decision or like sign them up for the plan and so on. But I think as time goes on, like this 65 plus audience is going to be completely capable of handling their own business, let's say like that, So I think that is going to help us on the CTV side. Really, I think when that happens, then the scale will also grow because then we will have, a diverse group of audiences, not just the typical, millennials or the 35, the 18 to 35 or 45, whatever we'll have, masses in the streaming world, including that 65 plus. That is still, definitely growing, but at a slower pace. So I think, again, it's a matter of as an industry growing out of that mindset.
Agree, totally. And they're multi-generational households, so
especially on the Hispanic side.
Especially on the Hispanic side, so it's very different. You have to look at it differently than the general market side.
You guys are doing great. Tara Lynn from Roku. Question around planning tools. When we think about this audience, you've been talking about the strategy, the consumer journey, different touch points. Help us understand like what should we be using and what's out there right now to understand when we should start in streaming, how we should be actually doing it. Are there tools that you actually have at your organization that we can lean into?
So from tools perspective, so we have like a hybrid model. So basically for those advertisers or agencies that have a programmatic in-house desk or that they handle they're buying internally, we offer our inventory that way. So we transact with multiple DSPs and we partner, through Free Will, we offer our inventory to many different partners. So that's one way that we approach that conversation. When it comes to on the direct IO or on the managed side, we really, again, we take a consultative approach with all of our agencies and advertisers, and we really try to understand what their goals are to better align than what tools and products to offer. So if a linear strategy will make more sense, we'll make recommendations based on what makes sense. What we've seen though is that we more and more are using hybrid approaches, hybrid platforms, and that they always include a linear component and then a streaming component, a sponsorship component, social, local digital side. So I meant that we try to do that. And then from an actual implementation, we have an entire team dedicated to onboarding clients, managing campaigns, tracking and measurement. We have, from a reporting tool, we have our own internal dashboards that then we share with advertisers so they can have first-hand visibility into how their campaigns are performing, recommend optimizations. And I think that's something that's also changing and evolving as technology advances. The company has also made improvements on the different tools that we use. But I think that we try to align our best to the client's strategy. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Right. I think first-party data is the currency that is going to be very valuable. I mean, it's already very valuable. I think, at least on our end, we look at Spanish language, people that are, audiences that are consuming Spanish language content, audiences that are consuming Telemundo content, but maybe watching Bravo, but they watch Telemundo, or of Universo. So we try to like cross-pollinate our data in a way, to your point, to make the informed recommendations that that match the client's goals better. In addition to that, we've also started to do contextual relevant targeting, where, for example, like Hispanic-led content or things that are aligned outside of purely data that are more content-driven. Being a publisher, we have thankfully the opportunity to do that, but that's something that we're seeing, definitely leveraging first-party data as part of our recommendation.
And from an agency perspective, working with both your organization and with Samsung, we, coming from a linear perspective, we don't have the tools that we need yet. And so as we test our way in, the insights that you're providing, we're working towards kind of a managed model. It's a sort of a hybrid model, and probably 3 years from now we'll have our own trading desk. But in the meantime, you bring a lot of insight into where, the main question of this panel, where are Hispanics? You bring a lot more insight into this than we ever could on our own. So I think you keep doing what you're doing, because and we're going to keep taking advantage of what you're doing.
How about a round of applause for the panel here?